Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I see people are trickling in, so we'll kind of have a slow start to make sure everyone can get in okay. But I just wanted to welcome you all to Chalet's virtual learning series. I'm honored to introduce Ben Lenhart, the author of The Gardens of the North Shore of Chicago, as our guest speaker today. Ben's been a loyal customer of Chalet for 30 years, and we're looking forward to hearing all about his new book and taking a peek into some of the beautiful private gardens along the shore of Lake Michigan. Following the presentation, we'll have a Q&A with Ben, so please submit any and all questions you have for him in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and then we'll get to those at the end. Ben, I will let you take it from here. I'm going to share my screen now so we can see your presentation. Can you see that, Ben?
I don't, but that's okay, as long as everybody sees a copy of the cover of the book.
Let's make sure. Hold on. Make sure. Okay. There we go. Okay, how about now?
Yes, but you're in, yes. There you go. Great. Well, thank you, Carly and Mishi, for inviting me to speak this afternoon. I hope that the audio will work. For those of you in Chicago, I'm talking to you from Charleston, South Carolina. We had a very bad storm that passed through last night, and unfortunately, when we have those kinds of lots of rain, unfortunately, my Comcast internet seems to have a period of kind of in and out. But if it gets too bad, we will resort to another mode of using the telephone, but hopefully this will work. I would also like to thank my friend Tony Fulmer at the Chalet for introducing me to Carly and Mishi, and for his expertise over the years in helping me purchase some of the plants that are now growing in my garden in Winnetka. I'm going to spend the next 30 minutes or so talking to you about 25 very special private gardens and some highlights of the Chicago Botanic Garden. As Carly mentioned, afterwards, I look forward to answering any questions that you may have. But first, I want to answer a few questions that I have been asked at presentations since this book was released on October the 20th. Why did I write this book? Well, three factors influenced me. First, as all of you know, there are many wonderful books and gardens on the East Coast, about gardens on the East Coast, the Southeast, like Charleston, where I am, the Northwest, and California. However, the Midwest seems to have been overlooked. In fact, no book about gardens on the North Shore has been published in over 100 years. I wanted to let the world know about some exceptional gardens on the North Shore and the people who created them. In addition, there are many different styles and sizes of gardens on the North Shore, and I wanted to show their beauty and the talents of those who created them. And thirdly, and equally important, I wanted to document these exceptional gardens for future generations. As Russell Page, the legendary English landscape designer, once said, There are few gardens that can be left alone. A few years of neglect and only the skeleton of a garden can be traced. In most cases, documenting gardens is the best way gardens can be preserved for the future. As some of you know, one of the programs of the Garden Conservancy is documenting outstanding American gardens. I am pleased to say that all of the final photographs taken by my photographer, Scott Shigley, will be given to the Garden Conservancy for their permanent documentation collection. Another question I have been asked is, how did I select Scott as my photographer? When starting this project, I knew that it would be best if I could work with a local landscape photographer. This would allow us to photograph gardens at their prime and also deal with the vagaries of the weather. I spoke with Doug Hare and Craig Bergman, both prominent landscape architects in Chicago, who highly recommended Scott, who did photography for them. Scott is a very talented photographer, as you will see, and most importantly, he's easy to work with and has become my friend. Another question people also ask is, how did you decide which gardens to include? There are many beautiful gardens on the North Shore. The common theme running through these gardens is the interest the garden owners have in their creations. Some are dirt gardeners like me, while others are less so, but all share a passion and love for their paradises. As Barb Carr, former president of the Chicago Botanic Garden, and whom many of you may know, concludes in her foreword, Ben once told me, great gardens have souls. Gardens of the North Shore of Chicago is a collection of exceptional gardens that Ben has ensured are gardens with souls, all reflecting the visions of the people who dreamed of them and the people who made them. Now let's look at a few photos of these gardens with souls. As I mentioned earlier, I wanted to show the diversity of gardens on the North Shore, so I have included 25 private gardens. I grouped the gardens in the book into 4 categories: classic, contemporary, country, and naturalistic, based on the predominant style of the garden. We begin with classic gardens. This photo shows one of the vibrant mixed borders in the Pergola Garden at Camp Rosemary as you walk towards the walled garden. Let's turn to Karen and King Harris's garden in Winnetka. Charles Stick of Charlottesville, Virginia, developed a series of garden rooms separated by yew hedges with boxwood demarcating pathways and borders. This photo, which was taken from the second floor of the house, shows the path leading from the dining terrace to the perennial garden with peacock topiaries in the distance. The rose garden, enclosed by yew hedges, consists of boxwood-edged beds containing David Austin shrub roses in Karen's favorite shades of pink, coral, and white. Garden Hybrid is my name for this classic garden in Glencoe. When the owners purchased their Georgian revival house over 20 years ago, they asked landscape architect Scott Byron to help them create a combination of the formality of a French garden with the color and the looseness of an English garden. Windows and terraces offer views of 2 matching boxwood parterres on either side of this intervening grass carpet, which is bordered by perennial beds in shades of lavender, blue, pink, and white. On a foggy day, Scott photographed this graceful ancient hawthorn tree, which is artistically braced for support and surrounded by a circle of boxwood. The garden owners are collectors of contemporary art. On the upper pool terrace, Jean-Michel Orthanel's mirrored glass sculpture contrasts with the lilac standards and the tightly clipped boxwood. Beauty without boundaries is the garden of Shirley and Pat Ryan in Winnetka and was designed by landscape architect Deborah Nevins. As a young girl living in Indiana, Shirley developed a love of tulips because each May her parents took the family on a pilgrimage to Holland, Michigan for the annual Tulip Festival. In the tulip garden, an allée of mature honey locust trees preside over large drifts of tulips in varying sizes, shapes, and colors. Terracotta pots line the allée with peony-shaped angelique tulips. The cloister garden features climbing wisteria on the Tudor-style pergola and boxwood parterres with topiary peacocks sculpted from yews. Deborah Nevins designed this creative boxwood amphitheater with 4 white crabapple trees on the ridge. This verdant delight can be seen from both the terrace as well as from the interior swimming pool. Maureen and Scott Byron's garden was naturally designed by Scott, a landscape architect. Maureen wanted a large screened porch for family dining and entertaining. There are many wonderful views from this porch, including this bluestone terrace with a contemporary fountain. A pleached Armstrong maple allée nestled into boxwood frames provides the focal point as one enters the porch. Clanola is an historic garden in Lake Forest that has been lovingly restored and enhanced by Stephanie and John Harris. Landscape architect Charles Stick, who designed John's parents' garden seen earlier, worked closely with the Harrises to fulfill Stephanie's motto of doing right by the house and the landscape. Ferruccio Vitali in 1927 designed the formal garden seen here after renovation by Stick. The garden is bounded by arts and crafts lattice paneling surrounding the descending lawn and perennial borders, and terminates with a small pool and replica of Diana de Versailles. An intricate boxwood parterre provides greenery on the large rear stone terrace, which opens onto a greensward and prairie beyond. Mixed borders alongside the walled garden to the right offer seasonal color. The vegetable garden, as Stephanie calls it, is actually 2 large garden rooms, a cutting garden seen here, and a vegetable garden that is surrounded by hornbeam hedges with 4 white Chippendale gate openings. The larger cutting garden room has 4 large boxwood parterres with old apple trees, perennials, and white iceberg roses surrounding a wellhead. Edgecliff is another historic property and the home of Donna and Terry McKay in Winnetka. Lead containers filled with pale and deep pink geraniums, purple petunias, and coleus flank the entrance to the French manor house. Craig Bergman reimagined the landscape originally designed by Catherine Brewster in the early 1930s. The walled garden displays a limestone-edged fountain and lawn panel surrounded by exuberant mixed borders and overflowing antique urns. The pergola, created by Craig, was inspired by the Great Dixter Garden in England and overlooks the pool terrace with 2 tiers of perennials on either side of the water. As Donna says, when the grandchildren visit, they almost swim among the flowers. Now we turn to Peggy Crow's garden in Lake Forest. This portion of the garden was designed by Rosemary Very, whom Peggy and her late husband Jack met while attending the Chelsea Flower Show some years ago. Rosemary took up the assignment and enlisted Craig Bergman to be her man on the ground regarding plantings and installation. Here is the Quadrant garden room exploding with perennials in midsummer. The plane tree allée, designed by Jack, is punctuated with terracotta pots filled with boxwood globes and terminates with a sculpture by John Kearney. Halcyon Lodge, a name given to the property by the original owners in 1905, is located in Lake Forest. The Parterre Garden was part of the original design, but the garden owner reduced the size of each quadrant to provide for larger pathways. The formal garden seen here burst forth each spring with tulips and other bulbs, and later with perennials and annuals in the summer. Also, as you may recognize, the cover of the book is the same Parterre Garden, but in summer bloom. This is a photo of one of two matching borders in the courtyard garden. Elegance is created with white perennials and annuals, along with mock orange shrubs and large lead urns perched in lattice-backed alcoves. Camp Rosemary in Lake Forest is the creation of the garden owner with the assistance of landscape architects and designers. The Parterre Garden is filled with a combination of blue and lavender perennials and annuals, with white and lavender roses on the outer edges. The manicured striped bent grass lawn can be seen in the background. The Pergola Garden, the first garden that was created by the owner, consists of three mixed borders facing each other. This border has a rarely seen Bradford pear hedge as its backdrop and includes perennials and annuals, all in the garden owner's favorite colors of pink, fuchsia, lavender, and blue. The earlier photograph introducing classic gardens was the opposite mixed border in this pergola garden. The White Garden is an intimate alcove surrounded by hydrangeas, bugbane, variegated dogwood, flowering dogwood, and perennials. A tall Chinese female figure stands at the end and also at the entrance. Now we're going to move to contemporary gardens. This is a view of alliums bursting in late spring in a bed in front of the contemporary house of the Blooms in Winnetka. Amy and Andy Bloom commissioned Doug Hare to create an artistic blend of naturalistic plantings in the front of the property with contemporary design near the lake. Here we see a portion of the curving entrance drive with Lake Michigan in the distance. Drifts of ladies' mantle, alliums, and betony carpet the woodland. Terraces on 3 different levels offer options for dining, entertainment, and sports activities. Descending from an upper level to the pool is a wide grass slope with adjacent triangles and rectangles of euonymus. The late John Bryan and Neville decided they wanted a guest house for their children and grandchildren, hence the summer house. The house is located near the original dairy farm complex in Lake Bluff. Peter Wirtz of Belgium created a contemporary landscape in keeping with the John Vinci designed 2-story glass and stucco building with its viewing tower. Here we see 3 canals reflecting the viewing tower and the ever-changing sky. Tightly clipped asymmetrical hornbeam hedges a trademark of Peter and his famous father Jacques, surround the east side of the house and provide dramatic linkage with the adjacent pastures. The Garden of Curves, which is my name for this garden located in Winnetka, was designed by landscape architect Doug Hare. The two-story stucco pavilion was designed by architect Larry Booth. Three giant rough-cut stone slabs surrounded by rhododendron, rogersia, pachysandra, and ferns greet visitors. A path winds through the woodland with a carpet of ladies' mantle and ornamental allium. Curved, irregular, herringbone stone walls contain the swale of lawn seen in the background. The next section of the book covers country gardens. This is a photo of an extensive mayapple grove at Crabtree Farm in early spring. When visiting Meadowa Manor today, you would certainly not know that Donna LaPietra and Bill Curtis had little experience with gardening when they purchased Meadowa Manor in 1990. Donna and Bill have restored and created many new gardens, including this aqua theater with its lawn platform for musical and theatrical performances surrounded by water and an evergreen backdrop. Espaliered apple trees separate the vegetable garden from the meadow where blue camassia blooms in late spring. Bill, who grew up in Kansas, has always had a love affair with prairies. Here they have created a large mound reminiscent of an Indian mound, with 3 different levels for viewing the 30-acre prairie of Blazing Star in full bloom in August. The back cover of the book is another photo of the prairie. Anne and Brian Belusic have been gardening together since they were first married. After moving to Winnetka, they engaged Craig Bergman to help create pocket gardens around the house. A hornbeam bower shelters a vintage statue at the entry to the motor court. Anne is a master at mixed plantings, placing peonies, roses, delphiniums, and poppies in beds as if they were flowers in a vase. Crabtree Farm, as I mentioned earlier, is located in Lake Bluff and is a historic property and was purchased by the late John Bryan and his wife Neville in 1984. In the rose garden near the entrance to the house, pink and yellow hybrid tea roses fill boxwood-edged parterres, while climbing roses, Clematis jacquemini, and ferns hug the perimeter. The heart of the gardens at Crabtree Farm is Neville's cutting and vegetable garden. Bordered on one side by a line of pleached crabapple trees, boxwood-edged beds contain colorful zinnias, snapdragons, and perennials blooming in late summer. John wanted his own garden, so he created the formal walled garden across from Neville's cutting and vegetable garden. The centerpiece is a large antique lead cistern overflowing with sedum, facing a lawn panel surrounded by perennials with hydrangeas climbing the walls. The gardens at 900 in Lake Forest combine the professional and personal lives of Craig Bergman and Paul Klug in an historic architectural complex. The West Gardens feature double mixed borders planted with daylilies, bee balm, phlox, and other perennials, with 4 large hornbeam cylinders in the distance. A snowfall of pink crabapple blossoms appears in spring. One of Craig's favorite spots is the shade garden, which features brightly colored coleus, chartreuse Japanese forest grass, a golden Japanese maple, and silvery blue brunera. You may say, Fredonia, Wisconsin is not on the North Shore. Why is this garden included? Well, the simple answer is I visited Joe Gramacki's garden several years ago and I was blown away. I wanted to find a way to include it in the book. So I asked Elizabeth White, my editor at Monticelli, if I could cheat a little and say that Fredonia is just a little north of the North Shore. And she said, yes, go ahead. We've done that before. Joe, who is a passionate preservationist and collector, acquired the property 2 decades ago. He has created a rural farmstead featuring colonial-style gardens filled with heirloom plants. Here is a view of 18th century style falling terraces, as they are called, separated by grassy slopes and paths. At Kelton House Farm, like in the 18th century, the highest fall, which is closest to the house, contains the rarest plants. Lower terraces are reserved for vegetables. A boxwood parterre, vegetables, and sunflowers can be seen on the second hall, with a garden house and a peafowl house in the background. Interestingly, the peafowl house is elevated by 8 English saddle stones. Late summer brings bright perennial and annual colors surrounding some of Joe's extensive collection of antique ornaments. Old Mill Farm in Lake Forest is the home of Sherry and Frank Mariani. Over the years, Frank has created a number of gardens on the property. His first garden was the enclosed vegetable and cutting garden. Frank, an avid cook, says, I wanted my own vegetable garden so I could go out and pick whatever was needed for dinner that night. Espaliered fruit trees separate the orchard from the lawn and the prairie beyond. Frank renovated the prairie, where today more than 15 species of prairie grasses grow, alongside flowering perennials such as purple coneflowers, Culver's root, and New England asters. A seemingly endless vista towards the prairie extends out beyond lush perennial borders of astilbe, coneflowers, Culver's root, and queen of the prairie. Sarah and Jim Tenbrook live in Lake Forest on property that was once the first Crabtree Farm of Grace Duran before she moved to Lake Bluff. Craig Bergman assisted the Tenbrocks with the design of the garden. Sarah says when they purchased their house, there were no crabapple trees present, even though the property was the site of the first Crabtree Farm. So Sarah said, we need to have crabapple trees. Today, a cloud of white crabapple blossoms highlight the formal ivy-clad entrance in spring. The formal garden to the west of the house includes 4 quadrants of roses, delphiniums, foxgloves, lilies, catmint, and one of Sarah's favorites, peonies. My wife Cindy and I purchased our house in Winnetka in 1980. I have since then relied on trial and error for the creation of the garden. Many times, unfortunately, it has been error. The Nantucket-style architecture and its location at the top of one of the most southern ravines on the North Shore guided all my gardening decisions. Stone steps descend through terrace borders, which are filled with perennials and annuals, many of which were purchased at the chalet. The Ravine Garden is an inspiration from a visit Cindy and I made some years ago to Quadrant, the incredible garden in Canada of Garden Conservancy founder Frank Cabot. Today, giant Japanese butterbur, one of my favorite plants, mingles with Joe Pye weed, irises, variegated sweet flag, and ferns. In early June, Siberian iris and giant Japanese butterbur emerge in the moist soil of the ravine adjoining the woodland garden to the upper right. The last section of the book is focused on naturalistic gardens. Here, crabapple trees mark a meadow opening at Kathy and Don Levin's garden in Highland Park. Don, a devoted conservationist, 30 years ago enlisted Scott Byron to save and restore 14 acres of abandoned farmland in northwest Highland Park. Today, there are over 2.5 miles of sandy gravel paths that meander through indigenous trees, shrubs, and flowers. Wooded walkways suddenly open up to a prairie and sky. Bordered by sweeping, soft-colored perennials and annuals, the pond is a refuge for birds and other wildlife. The late Marianne McLean created, with the help of Craig Bergman, an amazing garden in Meadowa. A diverse and significant Asian sculpture collection assembled by Marianne's husband, Barry McLean, was the impetus for the garden. Bergman designed floating islands in a naturalized setting amid a Midwest forest with strategically placed sculptures and other antiquities. Seen here, a zigzag gravel path leads to the elevated Ming Dynasty stone temple and columns in the background. Tang Dynasty horses wander in the brilliantly colored maple and oak forest in autumn. A walled garden known to neighborhood children as the Secret Garden is the paradise the late John Green and his wife Jean created for their family over 30 years ago. Doug Hare, who recently had returned to Chicago from an internship in England with the late John Brooks, was eager to demonstrate his skills on his first major residential commission. Shallow steps with lady's mannel, lamb's ear, and other perennials growing out of the gravel treads in chateau fashion descend from the terrace to the lawn and the pond.
Hey, Ben,
Throughout the garden.
Ben, sorry, I think the screen stopped sharing. Let me try it again. I got a few messages. Okay, we should be good to go. Let me know if you guys still can't see it. Okay. Should be on this.
I'm on slide 92.
Perfect. Okay, we're good to go.
Throughout the garden, whimsical bronze sculptures of animals created by Jean, a sculptress and painters, give a sense of humor and surprise to the garden. Here, a lively frog, known as the ballet dreamer, lifts a foot in delight near the pond. Jean says John posed for this sculpture. Nicole Williams and her husband, Larry Becker, have in Glencoe combined a Jen Jensen-inspired meadow with a Japanese landscape, as Harry likes to say. The garden has a collection of over 50 cultivars of Japanese maples, rare shrubs, and trees. Throughout the growing season, Larry prunes all of the maples as well as the conifers. Japanese painted ferns and Japanese maples of different colors and sizes line the path to the shade garden gateway. A canary yellowed flowered magnolia and the russet leaves of a Japanese maple are harbingers of early spring. A moon bridge and Japanese tea house are seen in the distance. Coneflowers, ornamental alliums, astilbes, hyssops, and bear's breeches create bold drifts of color in the upland meadow in full summer. The historic Rumsey Estate, which was designed by Jen Jensen in the early 20th century, is the home of Sandy and Roger Deramiti today. Surrounding the house, landscape architects Claire and Ryan Kettlecamp created picturesque style gardens in keeping with the English style manor house. Giant blue lobelia blooms in the clearing of native grasses and prairie perennials that evokes the work of Jen Jensen. The Mayflower Ravine runs through the property. Over the past century, the ravine had suffered greatly with erosion, fallen trees, and collapsed tableland. Roger wanted to restore the ravine to the natural look of the Jensen era. The restoration became an astounding 5-year engineering project. Listen to this. More than 1 million pounds of topsoil was spread, and native plantings of more than 275 trees, 3,400 shrubs, and astoundingly, 39,000 perennials were installed. Today, the natural beauty of the ravine glows in autumn. The last garden in the book is the world-class Chicago Botanic Garden in Glencoe. This garden has been an inspiration for many of the garden owners and landscape architects and designers that are represented in the book. This is a photograph taken in 2019 of the iconic Linden Alley, punctuated with stone spheres. John Brooks, the late English landscape designer mentioned earlier, created the Helen and Richard Thomas English walled garden. Each room of this garden represents a different tradition of England's long gardening history. Here we see the formal Daisy Garden. Evening Island, designed by Omi van Sweden and Associates, is 5 acres of layered masses of foliage and flowering plants, such as this haze of deep blue iris and catnip in late spring. Thank you for listening. And now I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have. And thank you, Carly, again.
You're welcome. We're going to go back to Levin because it froze for that part. So let's go back there. Oh, there we go. I think they just wanted to see the photos. What were you going to say?
Sure. No problem.
Perfect.
I just need the number of the slide there. Okay.
Yeah, it's 11. I can't see what number it is, but I'll just slowly go through these. Not exactly sure how much was frozen, but sorry about that, everyone.
Okay.
I think that should be good. Okay, let's answer some questions. Okay, here we go. Does anyone have any questions? If you do, please write them in the chat or the Q&A and I can ask them to Ben. Let's see. Anyone have any questions? Can you talk more about the trial and error of your own garden design?
Sure. Well, over the years, which is some 40 years, I have, as you can tell from the few of the photos, I have a fair amount of shade. And so I have cheated a lot. When looking at a label, it'll say that it needs full sun or a little bit of shade is tolerated. And I'll push the envelope and put some plants where they're really not intended. And I found that sometimes I luck out and it works. And then there are other times that it doesn't. The label was right. And so it is trial and error. The other thing is the placement of plants. I will put them to start over here. Maybe after a season or two, I may decide that it would be better if we move them, put them in another part of the perennial, the terraces. And so it's constantly changing. As I told you, Carly, I haunt all of the nurseries on the North Shore. And of course, the chalet being one of the principal ones. So I'm not sure what you now have outside, if anything, much, but you must be beginning to, because it is soon to be April. So if I were there, I'd be cruising by to see, but I don't arrive until the 1st of May. So you'll see me there lots from thereafter.
Good. Yeah, we just got pansies and hellebores in today. So finally a taste of spring, but yeah, we're excited to have you back. Let's see, we have a few more questions here. Do we just order the book online? Yes, on our website. It was linked in your confirmation email, and there's a discount code there too for everyone who attended the webinar. So check that confirmation email or the reminder email. It's in both of those. Are there gardens represented that are true Midwest prairie? Most are classical gardens.
Are they what?
Are there gardens represented that are true Midwest prairie? Most are classical gardens.
Well, the prairies are actually, you can see those in 2 of the gardens, Frank Mariani's and also Donna La Pietra and Bill Curtis's. At the Curtis's, in Meadowood Manor, which is open through the Garden Conservancy open days from time to time, Bill will sometimes load you up in a golf cart and drive you through the prairies, the pathways through the prairie. It's 30 acres, so it's quite a lot. And he's, of course, very proud of what he's produced because everything there is a native. Many of these plants, when they first started the process, it took considerable years because some of these plants had been, if you will, hidden in the earth for years.
Awesome. Someone said, wooden garden with shade and wet floor. What are your favorite plants to use?
Well, in wet, if you have enough space, Pedicidis Japonicus, which is common name is butterbur, is a bold architectural plant that, as you saw in my ravine, runs rampant. So my gardener and I, in the summertime, by July, are down there like we're in the jungles of Guatemala, with large knives cutting at the base to keep them under control. So you need to have a lot, or you need a lot of space, or you need to put them in a area that they cannot escape. But that's a fabulous, fabulous plant. The other plant that I love, it likes sun. It will take some shade, but it really likes sun, is Verbena Bonerensius. It is a see-through plant, about 3.5 feet tall. The wonderful thing about it is, it's a perennial, but once you get it established, you don't ever have to buy any more from the chalet or any other place, because it self-propagates, and it's just magnificent.
Sounds good. Did the Rumsey Garden have any help from the city, county, or conservation organizations in the restoration of the Mayflower Ravine?
No, it was all through the efforts of Roger Deramiti. He basically started on the project and became, like many gardeners, hooked on it, and devoted 5 years of his life to creating it.
Awesome. Do you know if any of these private gardens are open for tours?
Yes. The Garden Conservancy each year, last year we did not because of COVID, and hopefully this year we will, but that's still to be determined. We'll have gardens open. Some of these gardens, I am in discussions with the owners to see if limited numbers of people could come, and that will be on the Garden Conservancy's website as to the dates and if as we go forward.
Do you have any recommendations for building boxwood hedges and also rounded boxwood?
You cut out, unfortunately, Carly. What?
Yep. Do you have any recommendations for building boxwood hedges, also rounded boxwood?
Well, first, with boxwood hedges, do not make them perpendicular. Do not make them absolutely straight on either side. Do them slightly angled, like a little bit of a pyramid, but not obviously with a point at the top, but angle it so that the sun can reach the bottom of the hedge. Otherwise, what will happen is the bottom portions will tend to become sticky, and the top parts will be very, robust and green. So I think it's the shape and how you trim to keep the boxwoods in good shape. With regards to round, it's just constant clipping. But the wonderful thing about boxwoods, and unfortunately you cannot, well, you can maybe see through I am in a portion of our kitchen looking out. I don't know if you can see into the garden. I'm going to raise my computer. You can see some of the boxwood shapes through the windows there. But you can do wonderful things and topiary shapes with boxwood or with yew hedges, either one. You can make pyramids. I have here in my garden here in Charleston, I have finials on top of podocarpus tall hedges, and I just let that part grow, and I made it into a circle. And it took about 3.5 years to do it, but patience is rewarded. I would say, as all gardeners listening on this know, gardening is not for the impatient person, because it just doesn't happen. Last evening, I was listening to Bunny Williams, who's a noted interior designer, and she was saying she could do an entire house in 9 months, whereas to do a garden was 3 or 4 years, and that's true. You can't rush it.
Awesome. What are you seeing jumping worms, and what would you recommend to migrate the issue? I think should I mitigate the issue?
Yes, I'm not sure I know what a jumping worm is. I haven't ever seen one, but I guess I'm fortunate. That's the kind of question that you want to ask Jennifer at the chalet. And she can tell you what, and even better, bring one in and let her look at it. And she can tell you what to do.
Is the book specific with the plant materials as stated in your presentation?
In the book are, descriptions of the plants, both the common name and the Latin name, but there's, I don't go into details on, if you will, the care of plants or pruning boxwoods or things of that nature.
Someone wanted to know, what are the dimensions of the book and how many pages?
It's 253 pages. It's a little over a 9 by 12, but it's basically 9 by 12, but it's a tad more than the 9. It's 9 and 12 and 3/8. I'm not, I guess that's something I need to know.
They're also asking if it can be delivered, and yes, we do offer delivery services. These gardens obviously require a lot of money and staff to create and maintain. What about a book highlighting more attainable for wider demographic of gardeners?
Well, this, as I mentioned in the beginning, the purpose of writing this book, in addition to just telling the world that Chicago, with a very short growing season, produces some of the finest gardens in all of America, in my opinion. And so it was to document them. They do require maintenance. There's no doubt about that. The one that I've been asked this in the past, so I'll tell you, which garden requires the most? Well, it's Camp Rosemary. In the growing season, there are 12 gardeners helping. Some of them mow grass, that beautiful bent grass. Others, weeding. Well, there's a head gardener, a sub gardener, etc. But during the winter, it's not 12. It drops to like 4. But that's still quite an investment in a garden. In others, weekly service from a landscape company such as the Chalet or others. But what I would recommend is to look at these gardens, portions of them that you like, and you can achieve that in your garden. You don't have to have 5 acres to have a beautiful Japanese, for example, inspired space. And the best thing I can tell you is here in Charleston, where we do not have large acreage, we have small acreage, but we have pocket-sized gardens. But they are, it's a beautiful oasis, and it can be done in a small space. It's just, again, by looking, visiting gardens is the best way. As Frank Cabot said to me, plagiarism in the gardening world is the finest accolade that one can have. So, as I told you in mine, I copied Frank Cabot's ravine garden. Mine's kind of a poor man's ravine garden compared to Frank's, but nevertheless, I've adapted it to the size and scale of my place.
Speaking of, are you planning a similar book for Charleston Gardens?
My wife has said she will divorce me, and we've been married over 50 years, so I think I'll stick with her. But I must say, it's tempting, but I don't think that I'll be doing a book. There are a fair number of books on Charleston.
Did Dan Kiley do any North Shore gardens other than some at the Botanical Gardens?
No, you mean Dan Kiley from the West Coast, I assume?
It just says
there are none that I know of.
Yeah, that's. Oh, East Coast, he said, from East Coast, or she. Sounds good.
The one that is very special is Peter Wirt's garden that he did for the Bryans. No, Jacques Wirtz has died about 3 years ago, and his sons, two sons, are now running the business. But Peter has done no private garden in the Midwest in Chicago except for the Bryans, but he is designing a new garden that the Chicago Botanic Garden will unveil. Well, I think it'll be in the fall of 2022. So a year from now, you'll be able to see a Wirtz garden, and I've seen the drawings and stuff. It looks fabulous.
Awesome. Lots of compliments here. Thank you all so much for joining us. Ben, thank you so much for doing this. This was such an honor.
Well, thank you very, very much.
Awesome. Well, this recording will be on YouTube, so if anyone wants to watch it again or share with any friends, you can catch it on YouTube. But thank you all. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.